Hello everyone, this is Neetan Chopra, and today my guest lecture is on this very interesting field which we refer to as Technopreneurship. Right? Basically entrepreneurship in the digital era around technology. Right? So, let me first begin this lecture by sharing a story with you. Right? Now, let me set the context of the era we live in, and perhaps the context of some of the competencies you'll need as you foray into this field of technopreneurship, right? So let me start with this story, right? So a farmer and his wife, they decide that they have to sow the seeds and grow the Chinese bamboo on their farm, right? So, very happily, the two of them, they go to their farm, they get the best seeds, they get the best fertilizer with a lot of affection, they sow the seeds on their farm and wait for a period and come back and look at it, right? And they look at the ground and they look at the soil and absolutely nothing has happened. Right? So they are a perseverant lot, they go back again, get some of the best seeds, spend a lot of time with a lot of love and affection, lot of water, lot of affection, they take care of this plant and they say, come back after a period of time, and what do they say? What do they see? Absolutely nothing has moved. Yeah, but the wife and the husband, these are a persistent lot. They keep doing this the third time. They keep doing this the fourth time. Persistence is a bit waning now. The fifth time they come there, and again with the same passion, they go there, they sow the seeds, they water the soil, right, with a lot of love and affection. And then they come back after a period of time, look at the ground, and what's happened? Absolutely nothing, right? Taking out the last persistence that existed in their DNA, both of them, persist for another year, another period. And the fascinating story, and you can Google this, about the Chinese bamboo is that perhaps in organic organic or biology, it's one of the few examples of an exponential. So within 5 to 8 weeks, the Chinese bamboo suddenly grows by 80 feet, right? It's perhaps one of the few or only examples of an exponential curve, that exists in nature. Yeah? So the reason I wanted to start off with this story is that if you're going down this route of technopreneurship, please remember the story of the Chinese bamboo and the persistence, the passion, the patience that you will need as you go down this journey. Right? Now, before we delve into technopreneurship, I wanted to take a bit of a time off and spend some time in the next 15 to 18 minutes describing what I believe is the context that you would be operating your startup or your giving wings to your idea on. What is the context of all of this, right? So, my belief is that through the various ages, right, the agriculture age, the industrial age, perhaps somebody might call the information age, I think we are firmly now ensconced, we are firmly into the digital era, right? So I often say, that the basics of the business really haven't changed, right? So you still, need to obsess about your top line in business, the cost, the revenues. You need to obsess about your customers. You need to obsess about your employees, right? You need to obsess about, shareholders, or largely in the current era, the larger gamut of stakeholders. So that those principles really haven't changed. But what has definitely changed, right? And that's the context that you need to be aware of, is that the era has changed. We are now firmly in the digital era, right? So let me describe what I believe are some of the characteristics, some of the attributes of this era that we live in. Yeah. First and foremost, you feel this, right? Is this, the way the customers have changed, from millennials to different segments of demography to, wherever you live in the world, right? There is definitely a change in the customer viewpoints, in the customer genome, if I may call it, the customer DNA, and definitely in the customer expectations, right? So, if you're a products company, remember the escalation hierarchy of the customer expectation is they're already expecting, a level of services bundled with your products. And if you're a services company, like my previous stint, in a leading airline in the world here in the Middle East, was we used to say, I mean, products and services can be replicated by anyone, but perhaps the experiences are the next area of expectation for our customers, right? And then, I firmly believe that already at the horizon, you see this whole philosophy of trust, right, which is building up, perhaps relating to brand building, right, where more than experience, customers will flock to you if they trust you, if they see a level of authenticity. Everything else being equal, things like price, right? So customer expectations are perhaps going up this hierarchy. And another fundamental change is this whole concept of what the digital era has unleashed, which is a companion explosion of business models, right? And if you look up a business model, it could be this fancy stuff that it might be described, or very simply, how do you make money? And as I often tell my own kids, the world is full of opportunity today of different ways of making money, right? And achieving your aspirations. And I've just collated a set of business models which largely have arisen in the digital era with this beautiful concept of things which were scarce now becoming abundant. So I had the opportunity of being in the Silicon Valley. We had set up a lab with Carnegie Mellon University in my previous company, and then through that, I used to visit Singularity University, which was just next door. And they put in this whole concept of abundance, some of the great leaders who were associated with Singularity. And I think some of that is driving this explosion of business models, right? The digital era and its characteristics of abundance, right? So let's examine something that I'm quite interested in, which is platforms, right? So it was, I don't know whether you followed this, but there was an interesting debate in the summer of 2014, right? At that stage, a valuation was done of Uber, and it came up with a fairly big figure of 17 billion, right? And at that stage, Professor Damodaran of NYU, he kind of went, wrote an open, and you can read that up. He wrote an open retort and said, "I don't believe that Uber is worth so much." Whereas Bill Gurley, who was, I think, one of the potential investors, he then again openly contended. So there's this great debate, and he quoted W. Brian Arthur, right, who talks about this. Forget about diminishing returns, but in the world of abundance, diminishing returns were in the world of were relevant in the world of scarcity, right? After a particular time, you had diminishing returns. But Arthur had written a beautiful article saying, how in the world of abundance, which are driven by demand, it's actually reversed. There are increasing returns. So then Bill Gurley kind of said, no, in fact, you missed the complete point, right, of Uber, and the valuation should be much, much higher. Yeah. But I mean, so, just to share a bit this viewpoint, Damodaran was perhaps looking at Uber from the perspective of a very classical, perhaps information era or industrial era company, which was not underpinned by the platform effect, which was not underpinned by networks. And he was saying, given all of this, these are all buzzwords. I would not, put the total value of Uber anywhere near 17 billion. In fact, I would say it's around 6 billion, right? And he said, it's basically a taxi company, and why should it be worth? And he gave a lot of arguments, right? As you would expect. He's a very renowned professor and very, expert at valuations, and he gave this opinion, right? And you can read that up, right? But of course, the contending argument was that there is an inherent assumption that the past is a reflection of what the future is. But the fact is, we are in the digital era, and the business models which are evolving in the digital era, I mean, first of all, the exponential curve is something that humanity and we as humans are not able to deal with very easily, right? I mean, it's not something that comes to us intuitively. Right? So his view was that, listen, it's a game changer. It's not about a taxi company, right? It's about car ownership itself, and you can see that today. How that since 2014, how the whole mobility industry has completely transformed, right? Driven by the likes of Uber and Lyft, right? And then of course he spoke about Brian Arthur's seminal work about increasing returns and said that it's not going to be diminishing because these resources are not limited. The resources are in fact abundant and not scarce, right? So you will see increasing returns as you scale, and hence the market opportunity is in fact 25x large. Right? Now, I think the reason I wanted to share this beautiful debate that happened online for everybody to see, and of course, we are much 6, 7, 8 years later. This was in 2014, right? We are well better informed of the past, but the fact is, I think the digital era is characterized by some of this. Right? It is characterized by increasing returns driven by network effects. Right? It is asset light. It is a knowledge economy, and a friend of mine in the Valley coins it winner takes all. But I think a bit more modest view of that would be winner takes most markets. And of course, there is a continuous grab for the next technology frontier, and you can see that, right? All these big digital natives are continuously looking at what the next technology frontier is, whether it be blockchain or quantum, right, or in material sciences, the whole revolution that is happening, or in genetic sciences, right? So, and this ability to sense and respond never really stops, and but also these technologies, when they do not exist on their own, and when they are actually intersected and interconnected, is when you really get the exponential. So fundamentally, I think the debate kind of highlighted, using Uber as an example, what the digital era presents in terms of business, and that's an important component of the context that I wanted to share with you. Right? So if you look at specifically the platform business models, which if you see Alibaba, AliExpress, Amazon, a lot of these guys are based on these beautiful network effects, right? They are characterized by some very unique attributes, right? So, for example, low variable cost, low capex, asset light, data driven, network effect, ecosystem driven, right? And the whole purpose there is to drive. So, if you see, I often take an example, and it's coming in the next slide in any case, of the singles day, right? Where within, I think this particular 11/11, we had almost 30 plus billion in a 24-hour period. I mean, this is just unbelievable, right? 30 to 35 billion in 24 hours is the amount of interaction that happens within the platforms, right? So that's not the revenue that the platform owner makes, but that's the core interaction that they drive, right? And it's a completely different way of looking at it. In the pipeline business, you were always concerned about driving the product, driving the service. In this case, you are more concerned about providing a factory floor, providing incentives, and basically helping boot up the network effect. So very different forms of business models which you need to be aware of as you look at launching your techno venture. And I covered this. I mean, it's a great example of somebody having the foresight to launch a platform business, and just unbelievable results. I remember in one of my previous companies, I was interacting with some folks from Alibaba, and one of their comments was, "Listen, we don't no longer run just a platform; we run a mini economy." And they couldn't be more right. $500 billion of revenue goes through their platform in a given year. Right? So it's quite amazing how these platforms are developed. Okay, the other big shift is, of course, what underpins all of this, right? And not because we are in a technopreneurship course, and not because my whole life has been around technology, but the fact is, you cannot ignore the fact that technology underpins a lot of these changes that we are seeing in the digital era. My normal advice to all business folks here, and to you as well, would be the same. Not everybody needs to know coding. Not everybody needs to know how to set up a cluster on AWS. That's not the technology capability that we ask of everybody. There is a set of specialist folks who do this. But I think in the digital era, it would be quite a miss if you did not at least be totally immersed in this world of technology, be connected to it, so you can have the foresight of what is the future looking like, right? Which one of these technologies is going to now impact your business, or provide, in your case, a great opportunity for doing something brilliant for yourself and for the society at large, right? So I mean, and you see these waves, right? I mean, with blockchain, we ran blockchain pilot 6-7 years back. It started with Bitcoin, went into ICOs, had a lot of winters, asset backed, and now I believe what's happening. I mean, if I look at the way blockchain has finally emerged, I used to say permissionless networks, which is basically open networks like Bitcoin, will be the prevalent pattern. But what's really happening is business networks have formed where a bit more permission and closed networks are using blockchain for making it highly efficient. Not bad. I mean, something that is progressing. And then of course AI is ready for prime time, and something you should seriously look at as you build your B2B or B2C techno businesses. AI in the enterprise, I think, is ready for prime time. So a lot of technologies and their impact. I think the other facet of the digital era is you should not work alone, right? I mean, remember that most innovations today are co-created, are in the intersection of different perspectives, different people. So, remember this as you set up your, remember this context, right? I mean, my own experience, I ran a travel hackathon in the Silicon Valley some 7-8 years back, and we had 300 candidates come in. And by the time I had probably spent 15 years in the travel industry, and the youngest member of the team was a 12-year-old. We used to call these hackers, right? So she was around 12-year-old kid, and we had a group of 60 plus folks who were also hacking together, right? So after a 24-hour period, we set up the marketplace for all of them to show what they had done in 24 hours. And I must tell you, I mean, what the crowd created for us and the ideas that came through was so unique, was so visionary, that despite my 15-20 years of experience then in travel, I could have never have conjured up those, right? So remember, there is a world out there to co-create, right? I mean, I always say that the learning and co-creation have almost become free, right? I mean, this course is being given to you, online, and similarly, I have attended a lot of MOOCs. A lot of this learning from top people. All you need really in your mind is that curious nature and this ability to continuously learn, right? So remember co-creation. So, to summarize then, what would be the top 4 or 5? I mean, there are lots of other facets of the digital era, but as you think of technopreneurship, as you think of setting up a technology-related venture, perhaps, think about this context that I'm going to share. Right in the center of this genome of the digital era is the customer, right? They want personalized service, they want it fast, they want it frictionless, and the fact is the customer expectations are all fluid, right? So whatever they have experienced in another brand, irrespective of how much funds they have raised or what industry they belong to, customers will expect the same to happen with whatever you produce. So please take notice of this, take notice of the customer expectations, take notice of the fluid nature of customers, and concentrate on producing something which is relevant to me, highly personalized. Right? Business models are fast changing, right? There are a whole slew of business models out there. So before you take your decision, do an opportunity assessment of what businesses appeal to you most, what kind of business models would you like to explore, then choose one and put your passion behind it. Right? Within the business models concept, think of platforms, think of network effects. That's been a predominant pattern of all sorts of disruption for all sorts of industries, right? Whether it be retail, whether it be airlines, whether it be hospitality, whether it be taxis, mobility, that has been underpinned at the backdrop of all kinds of changes. So think of platforms as you look at your entrepreneurship, right? Data, AI, technology, especially, I've taken this out, being precise, ability, and the next hackathon I ran in the Valley was on AI, right? And what was wonderful is one of the hackers ran around 400 different business, AI models, using these platforms like TensorFlow. So ensure you have baked in AI from the very beginning into your thought process, and through your journey, bake AI into whatever you're trying to do, especially things like personalization. Right? Remember, you're not alone, right? There's a whole world available. All you have to do is be curious and to reach out, right? Be curious and reach out and co-create this with people who are outside world rather than trying to generate everything yourself. Right? And then last but not the least, technology does underpin a lot of things in the digital era. So make sure you're close to this, make sure you're close to its strategic impact, right? So, before I went into some of the other aspects of technopreneurship, I felt it was very important for me to share some of my thoughts on the context that underpins the era where you'll be setting up your techno venture. In the last segment of this lecture, I tried to paint the context of the era that we live in, which is the digital era, right? Whether it be from a customer perspective, whether it be from a technology perspective, or indeed from the explosion of business models, right? So that kind of sets the context for then looking at the main topic of technopreneurship, right? So instead of me trying to share my experience, since I am an enterprise guy, in the next segment, I'm going to get some of the startup founders in the technology world, who are either at the early stage, some of them are at pre-revenue, some others are at commercialization, some others have scaled their startups. So at various stages of the startup or a technopreneur's journey, I'm going to interview these startup founders and ask them what their true experiences have been and to share that with the class. So that's what the segment 2 is going to be all about. Thank you. Hey Jonathan, thank you so much for being here and contributing to this technopreneurship lesson. Maybe we can start off with you sharing with us what your startup was all about.
Thank you, Neetan, for inviting me. So I created my CRM, which was a B2B CRM system, SaaS model for real estate agents, so that they can create and manage their stock of properties and receive the leads after publishing the properties. And today it does the entire journey, doing the transactions and enabling them across all the sales journey.
So basically, any other thoughts on the business model itself?
From a free model that we have started, we are today bringing into a freemium model. We're monetizing it, and this is a very interesting part of value to be able to sell it to people. And yes, you need to have a good model for this.
So that has been the journey from initially free to a premium to now, kind of monetizing them.
Yes, absolutely. We still keep a free product, so for entry-level clients. But yes, now we are in the monetization phase, which is a very interesting phase to follow up.
And Jonathan, I know your passion has been on product and technology. So in the context of a startup, what would be some of the mantras and learnings in context of a startup, not in the enterprise?
Okay. So if I split those mantras into tech management and the other in product, one main mantra for me was to lead by example with my colleagues, developers. And when you are a very small startup, you are there with them in the battle, and you have to show that you are with them during difficult times. So always lead by example, arrive early in the office, show that you start early, you end late. If you have a late deployment, a very early deployment, you are there with them, and they don't feel that you are the prince and you don't do much, and they do the whole hard work. So for me, this is the most important into a small team.
You were leading the product management.
Yes, yes. The second mantra for me was to share my passion and become an evangelist of my own product, and making them accountable for the product and the ownership of that product, so that we could focus on outcome rather than output, so that I could end up with missionaries instead of mercenaries. And really, after that, they really feel it's their product as much as it is yours or the company, and then you are business partners actually. So that's my second on tech. On product, I would say you have to become knowledgeable about what you do. It sounds kind of normal, but you need to be a power user to understand things from inside so that you can understand your clients and really be a trustful source of truth. Um, so that's my third. My fourth is from the very beginning, always remember that the power of aesthetic, of an interface, beautiful design, and it can often mitigate weaknesses of your product that is still yet not yet nature, but with a nice design you can, make client happy. And the last one, which is probably today, after 6 years of understanding and working, my mantra today would be to, for any feature or product that I would launch, is first to test the value, assess the demand for it, and the feasibility, whether it's business or technology, and the viability, mostly business viability.
So, a lot of passion, a lot of rolling up your sleeves, becoming the role model. So, a lot of leadership qualities
Yes.
right, goes into product and tech management. And then, Facebook had this whole idea of let's eat our own dog food, And I think you said it as well, which is making sure that, you use your own product, get involved as a customer, right? So, as a leader of product and take some of these mantras, work really important.
Very important. You need to meet
Yeah.
the people you develop for. Need to understand. When I say you have to understand from within, is going on the field with the clients and understand how they do. I remember I even asked a client to be an intern for a few weeks, so I could see. Yes,
Getting a client to be a part of your team.
yes,
Jonathan, Steve Jobs once said, I read his quote which said, design is not how it feels, design is not how it looks, design is how it works. But I guess what you are saying, and one of the mantras of product is, yes, it's important how it works, and that will evolve, as you said, as you mature the product. But perhaps aesthetics, the look and feel is equally important. Yeah? That has been your experience.
yes. It's the first thing they see
Yeah.
at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
So there is a little bias with this. Of course, if the workflow doesn't work, they will see it, and then you cannot really palliate. But if the workflow works and you flatter them a little bit with a nice design, they will love it more than what is it really.
That's been your practical experience building this great
Yes,
product.
yes.
What about some of the pitfalls, Jonathan? What would you guide our students, the people who are listening to this, this lecture, to watch out for, as they build their techno stuff?
So my biggest difficulty from the early beginning was to source talent, developers, and be able to create a team. That for many years it was my biggest struggle. And as I started with different teams, one in France and one in Dubai, it was very, very difficult. And having a co-located team is one of the hardest thing and the best thing actually. The second best thing is to find skilled and good people. Like, first of all, people who think good, straight, and when I say good people, is the people that in difficult times they will stick with you. They will not abandon you at the hardest time. So finding the two is very difficult, and when you find them, make sure that you pamper them. It's your friend, it's your business partner, it's their product. That's the most important for me.
So, putting it another way, one of the pitfalls is people forget about the fact that even a startup business is a people business. Right?
It
More
is.
so.
It is
Even,
absolutely.
the passion and the time
Alone, you
pressure.
cannot do anything. So you must be together to do it.
And in the enterprise world, we talk about mindset over skill set. But even in the startup world, you feel having the right trustworthy team, having the right
Absolutely.
mindset is probably needed.
Absolutely. So the next pitfall I would say for product management is balancing between velocity and quality. So as a product owner, product manager, you always want to go faster, more features, in less time. And in this, I say velocity. Of course, you can balance it with quality and sometimes, doing things correctly, listening to the engineers who ask you to do unit test, feature testing, and sometimes you take a little bit more time, but it's more scalable, it's more long term. So if you lose sometimes 20% of velocity, but you earn on very long term, then it's a good thing to do. And wanting everything as quickly as possible might end up into a very dirty solution at the end that you will have to rethink completely.
So thank you, Jonathan. So basically, I mean, watch out for the team as a potential pitfall. Right?
Yes.
Get mindset instead of just skill sets, and then watch out for this paradox between velocity and quality.
Exactly.
So one of the lectures I was given in Abu Dhabi, there was one of the founders asked me this question. So let me pose it to you. In today's world, as people build their tech stack or build their startups, should they from the very beginning think of it as use properly architected microservices, cloud native, or should they do a quick and dirty MVP and then as they get funding evolve it? What would your advice be?
I would advise to go for a quick MVP that is not minimal viable product, but minimum viable prototype. And in that sense, if you can stop there and then restart from the beginning cleanly, that is, of course, the best thing. The pitfall often that is seen and is that from an MVP, it becomes a production system. And there you end up into difficult times. Now, it can be other factors. Either you're not ready, either you don't have the skill set to create something good quality at the beginning. Maybe you don't have the time, you're going to run out of money. So you need something out quickly to start to make traction. And then, sometimes it's a pros and cons that you have to take. For myself, for my product, there was already a basis which I had to build on top of it. And this was the pitfall. The basis was not good. And after a year and a half, I had to redo everything. But then you learn. It's part of who you are at the end, and you learn. That's the experience, and it's fun time also.
So, as we close this out, Jonathan, anything else that comes to your mind, in terms of advice to people who are just perhaps thinking about this journey of technopreneurship? How many years would you have been in this world?
6 years.
6 years.
6 years.
Rolling up your hands.
Yes.
Doing those late nights, building the product, managing the tech. Yeah. So any other pieces of it?
So what I've said before, like really today, if you have an idea, test it. Try to find a way to reach to your client or your future client by the way of surveys or polls, and try to assess whether first they want what you want to create, so that you don't end up creating something that no one uses. That's the most important. And then it will definitely help you to know how to do it and what feature you put. That is probably the main pitfall. And if you can keep lean and do this quickly, but at least having a bit of structure, scientific a little bit, then you ensure yourself some viability.
Thank you. Brilliant. Great advice. Think through needs, rather than just have an idea and go for it.
Yes.
Make sure you do an assessment. As you very rightly said, MVP is not minimum viable product. It is minimum viable prototype. Balance the urge for speed.
Yes.
With making sure it's architected so it will scale. Jonathan, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mahesh, thank you very much for being with us. Let me first start off by asking you about what exactly is your startup, what's its business model, maybe briefly describe your startup to us.
Okay, so I founded this company called Flynava. Flynava's core ethos was to take up airline challenges, which nobody else ever does. So the idea came because I used to work in an airline and providing solutions to various customers around the world. And I wanted to pick and choose areas which nobody else was picking up. So that I thought that's where the real benefit of providing some solutions would be. So the whole concept of Flyinova, taking up challenges nobody else does. And that's where we started building a product, a software product on pricing, because this is the most complex area with the world changing so fast. The idea of build something on pricing came up, and it took us about 7 years. And now we have a product which is live at a customer, and we are actually growing with the product. Our business model is to provide software as a service or product as a service, and we look to make revenues by actually having a monthly usage fee, more implementation, consultation. So the whole focus is to actually provide value to the end consumer while generating revenues for Flyinova.
So Mahesh, I know you are very passionate about the product itself. Perhaps share with us, some of your learnings through this long journey. I mean, miracles happen overnight, but changes take time. 7 years to build your startup, which is fascinating. But perhaps share with us some of your learnings, some of the pitfalls, some of the successes, the trials and tribulations with respect to building a product within a startup context.
So, as you rightly said, there are plenty of trials, tribulations, all the combinations put together. So basically, the whole idea of product comes up that we need to have at least a minimum viable product first. But what is a minimum viable product? Who will pay for that minimum viable product? That's the core question here. So when you try to address challenges, one of the key things that we looked for was the challenges are real and it's going to sustain for a longer time. Because when I build the product, by the time I finish, like I said, 7 years, the problem should still exist. By the time I finish the product, the problems disappear, my product is useless. Secondly, we needed to have an active participation of the end users. So basically, we interviewed about 70 pricing analysts around the world who told us what the real problem was, and we could see it. Basically, the core problem with pricing is the world changed, but the systems remained the same. So actually putting a price together a day or 2 or 3 was considered normal. The world changed, and the world change said that I need to change prices every minute. So look at the situation, the challenge that the users were facing. That the current systems were doing for days and we were doing it for minutes and seconds. So the challenge we believed would exist for a long time. So that's the first criteria for anybody deciding to do a product. The second is, even though it's very challenging, it's best to go into an area where others are not there. So there were some pricing products, they were focused on actually just distributing the fares. That was their main focus. We said no, the new world is of analytics, the new world is of actually decision making. So we will build a product mainly for these two areas. The distribution and all the other competing features we want to build will become the norm. It will become a basic requirement for the product. So we try to completely disrupt the space by saying that, listen, analytics will play a big part. The third important part that where we got it really wrong is, even though our users actually continuously gave us requirements, the users' business changed. Their business model changed. We built a product which was perfectly signed off by them, but when we went to go live, this product just didn't work. We had to redo the whole thing again. So there is absolutely no recipe for success. You have to keep trying. The passion has to continue. You keep trying again and again and again, and we got it right on the 13th time. This product was built over 13 times all over again, and finally we got it right. And the other key factor that you will need to look at as a product, every feature you build should have an ROI. You cannot have some standard features which is looking standard, because the moment you show one standard feature, the differentiators disappear. Because we also do it, they also do it, this guy also do it. So one of the biggest challenges is to figure out every aspect of the product to have an ROI which is very strong, and also look at differentiating each product feature in such a way that, oh, this is new, this is new, this is new. The new sequence has to continue. Otherwise, you will not be seen as an innovative product. So these are some of the basic structures that we need to go.
Mahesh, thank you for sharing that. Just one.
So Mahesh, one of the mantras you've described in product is around persistence, which is quite amazing. I mean, 13 tries, right? And that persistence that you had, right? That's a great learning, I think, for startups. There is no easy way of doing this, a lot of perseverance and patience, right? I mean, one of the things that, when I talk to founders, they get stuck with, or they sometimes are successful with, is the whole funding mechanism for VCs dealing with all of this.
Yeah.
How has your journey been on the funding aspect? And what are some of the things you've used, through your?
So, given that I keep planning a lot, so I made 4 checklists to see how I'm going to be fully aligned with what I'm going to do in the future. Having been through all that, having met a lot of other founders who were successful, a lot of founders who were not successful, I decided to put my own money. I said I'm not going to take any funding till the time I'm profitable. So that was one of my first basic structures. Because when you're profitable, this is very much like banks. If you have money, they'll give you a loan. If you don't have money, they don't give you a loan.
Right.
So the VCs are exactly the same. They see that you're growing, your potential is fantastic, you've already made money, you have the model ready, then everybody wants to come to you. So the second thing is, I wanted to build a startup with absolutely my specification. It had to be a lot of fun, it had to be a lot of pleasure, it had to be a lot of things. Like I said, we made 13 tries. I didn't want anybody to come and tell me, why are you doing this extra, do something else. Because when you're building products especially, there is always a clear available opportunity for you to do services. And you make money out of that. And typically most of the product companies, they start towards the end, they'll veer towards services. And then they lose the focus on product. So I said, I'll put my own money. Let me not wonder about the VCs. But overall, I've been always planning. Like for example, right now we are very much in discussions with many other venture capitalists who come to us on their own and say that, okay, now you're profitable. We would like to take a stake in this company. So one of the key things is, one of the best things that you can do is, if you have customers, it's the best. Second is, if you build a very differentiated product, they can't compare you against anybody. That's half the battle. Second thing is getting a business model whereby you are profitable with the very first customer.
Which is rare. I mean, not
Which
many
is
founder
very,
members.
very founders look at that. So we actually planned for the first customer. It took us 1.5 years before we actually became profitable with the first customer. There was always an eagerness to go for funding the moment we started generating revenue. But we said, right now we are not making money as a profit. So let's have a full year, financial year of making profits, and that's the number we'll go and show them. Now the venture capitalists look at it and say, you know what, this guy's already made. Now if I put in my funds, I'm actually accelerating his growth, which is where every VC is looking for a 10x return. He sees that, okay, he's done it for 1. Now if I multiply it into 10, my share will increase. So one of the key things is to focus on what they really need. And there is enough available to actually choose the right venture capitalist. Because there are plenty of guys, there are people who don't even know that they are the venture capitalists, but their money is actually coming to you.
Right.
But the key is to actually figure out certain specific guys aligned to your industries who can add value to your product, to your customers, also to your network, and actually help you grow genuinely rather than just growing the money. I mean, these are all things that you have to watch out for before you jump in, because most of the other models are they'll give you the money, you could be one of the 9 guys that lose out. And for them it is nothing, because the 10th guy they will win, but you're the guy who's lost out completely for all your efforts. So carefully choosing the VC, planning yourself to be ready for the VC. I think these are the 2 key things that I've learned over this exercise.
And also timing, right? You said as long as you could, you deferred it. I remember I was in a startup kind of meetup, and one of the founders said that during commercialization stage, for every 100K, you end up losing 15%, right?
Absolutely.
So you got to.
Yeah, and the key thing there is, when I say profitable, there are 2 big aspects. One is to have a cash flow.
Yeah.
You need to run, there is a burn rate, you need to have enough cash to actually run the company. Because even 1 month of cash flow down, all your dreams can go for a toss. So keeping cash flowing is one. Second is to actually show a clear profit, not a fudge number or a number that you can just say I'm profitable. You should be able to actually declare an audited result and say, you know what, this year I made X profit. And in the X profit, you should show enough potential that if you now get the next customer, that X is going to multiply into 3 or 4. If you're able to show that, any venture capital will come. So keeping cash to burn, and secondly, showing the potential to him that, listen, these are my costs. For example, in our case, it's very straightforward. A product company you invest and you have 50 people working. But now the next 5 customers, I don't need a single extra person.
Right.
So my costs are going to remain same, but my revenues are going to multiply 3 times, 4 times, 5. If they see it very clearly, you're ready for it. So that's the timing.
The scale economics, as long as you can show it very clearly, then
You should be able to do it.
Mahesh, a lot of my VC contacts, nowadays tell me that the one thing they look out for when somebody walks in, is the founders, the teams, right? Rather than even the idea, right? Teams seem to be winning over ideas, right? In your journey, describe the importance of a team and how did you go about building a rocking team for your startup?
Okay. So conceptually, I'm a very big risk taker. So what did I want to do? I want to build a team which I wanted to be a big differentiator from day one. So how do you do that? So one of the ideas that came to me was, given that the problem area that we chose was the most complex, when I initially went to all the airline folks, friends and everybody, they said, oh, that's a very complex area, we can't bet our career into it. So obviously I couldn't get a single guy from an airline, my best friends. I had a lot of people, I said, he's the perfect guy for this role. I couldn't get the founding team. So what did we do? I worked on all the advisors first. People who knew the subject, who could really guide me into what is right and what is wrong. We worked with the pricing analysts round. So we had all those frills kept ready. Then I took a biggest leap of faith and hired freshers straight out of college.
Wow.
Management graduates, engineering graduates, all of them who didn't know a word about technology, obviously didn't know a word about the domain area. And then I got some of the best known experts in the world to come and train them over a period of time.
Wow.
And gave them the challenge that, boss, this is an unchallenged and this is an unsolved challenge. Can you please solve it? These guys were so motivated, and it is a straightforward calculation. You hire 10 guys, you will end up with 4 or 5 who are brilliant. Over the last 4 years, we are very, very happy to state there are at least 16 to 17 people in my team. When they walk into an airline, they tell me, I am experienced with so many years in the airline, they say keep out, we want to talk to the team because they know better. These are guys who have learned in the last 18 months to 2 years much more than any of the most experienced airline guys know. Because here, they were only working to solve the challenges that exist. They were not doing any regular job. They were 24/7 saying, oh, that's a challenge, he's doing it for 2 hours, we're going to do it in 5 minutes. How do we do it? We will come up with some crazy ideas, but in the end, the experts will come and say, listen, oh, this looks like great, follow this track. The perseverance of the team, the way we built it, a combination of MBA, IIT graduates, and different various institutes, was one of the best. Secondly, what happens is, even when you hire experienced guys can bring in some best practices, some experience on how to actually solve a particular problem. But that completely restricts innovation. Because they are not thinking new. They will say, this is how I did it in my previous company, this is how I want to do. But we have chosen to do something absolutely new. So how do you address that? We only bought experienced guys when we actually signed the first customer. We had to go and show them that, listen, this is an experienced guy coming and implementing it. The back-end job was all done by freshers, absolutely freshers, who knew the Fly Nama culture, who knew the way we had to work, who knew that they had to solve a challenge to survive. That is the kind of spirit that we build within the organization, that if you don't do this, we don't survive. So then, of course, the training, the bits, the actual customer experience. One of the biggest things that we did as a team, I have sent a guy who just joined straight out of college within 1 week to a customer site. He worked there for 3 months. He came out as one of the best guys known to the customer and to us. So taking these chances, giving them the opportunity, giving them the guidance, and any amount of mistakes, we said no problem. This is a mistake because we are all learning a mistake. The learning was huge. The effort level that they put in to actually solve the problem was very, very high percentage. Not the usual where you do regular work and then you solve 10%. Given all this, today I'm very pleased to say we are a team of about 50.
Wow.
Out of which about 16 of them, as I said, are been with me for 4 years now. Extremely experienced, so much so that some of the best industry organizations have said that they know what most other guys don't know. And that's the level of focus that I have. The next thing that we did was we completely removed any kind of structure. Even in startup, they have a CTO, CEO, something, because everybody fancies titles. I said nothing. Everybody could talk to me, everybody could deal with me, everybody could talk to the customer. Because normally these are structures that they'll say, oh, CTO will talk, others won't talk. And the customer actually loved it. When somebody, all we had to tell the younger crowd is, guys, listen, this is a guy who's a super duper expert who's come to tell you something. He's going to give you in a real concentrated fashion. Listen and then think. As long as that skill comes in, you are actually sorted. Because then you start creating a big chunk of people who, in fact, I normally tell many of my team members who have been there for 1.5 to 2 years, you are next in line to be CEO. To run the company, I could relax, and that's the level to build. And it's a very satisfying journey actually.
I mean, all these cliches of recruiting for mindset and training for attitude,
absolutely,
or whatever, the other way around. I mean, recruiting for attitude and then training for skill. You actually did it in your startup.
Absolutely. And second thing is, we didn't say any of these. We didn't go by the cliche saying this guy is IIT, this guy is different. We didn't go for the degree. We didn't go for any of these. We only look for the attitude. And we said, if this guy can slog, if this guy can think, this guy. In fact, most of my interviews, I just ask them one question. Ask me a question I can't answer. That's the interview. I just want to see how are they going to challenge me. That's it.
Curiosity and inquisitiveness and disruptive thinking.
Most of the time, these interviews, when I ask that question, they don't know what to ask. And they keep saying, sir, ask me about Python, ask me about technology. I don't know. You challenge me now. Come on. And that's how the interviews go. So once you build that ecosystem, now what happens is the same guys go back to their own colleges and they recruit. Because now I know that system works. And they themselves go and say, you know what, he sent me after 1 week to the customer side, you come and join me, you're going to have a fun ride. So currently my employees go and recruit from their own colleges with their own experience, not because there is something called Fly Nama, which is a huge gainer for us.
It builds a flywheel.
It's a flywheel.
A flywheel impact of talent,
Absolutely. And we just have one more initiative which is very interesting. We have worked with a university called NIIT University. So where we all our actual real life problems and challenges are part of curriculum for the computer science graduates. So 380 students on average, they join in for our curriculum. So it is taught as a curriculum. And if they solve the problem, they get 100 marks for that particular subject. So we give them the infrastructure, they actually solve the problem and put it in production. It's not as if we're just doing a training or anything. They actually work as if they are like a hackathon or like an internship or whatever, but they work for a curriculum for marks. And we see them over 4 years. On the 4th year, they come and work with us for 6 months. And we know who are the guys who have really done well over the years. They have their mark sheet on our subject. So we now find that the intake of this kind of people actually solves the problem for going out for recruitment, and it's a quick one. So this year we took about 8 people like that, and they come in, they know about Flynava, they know about the challenges, the technologies aligned. So we did this for 4 technologies, and we are able to get people there. So we are trying different
Multiple ways.
ways of actually getting, because one of the key things I believe, when I go out to a customer and say we are innovating, we are doing all this, I want every bit of the company being shown as innovative. So when customers come and they see our product, they say, who built it? I want to see the expert who built it. It will be one young guy, 1.5 year experience. I say he's the person who's built it. They can't believe it and they're shocked. That's a plus shock. It's not a negative shock. They're like shocked. She built it. Okay, let me talk to her. Within 5 minutes, they realize that person knows that subject inside out, maybe more than them. That's the kind of culture we want to get.
Super. So Mahesh, as we close this session out, any parting thoughts for, as people think of, ideate, and then aspire to build their own techno firms? What would your parting advice be?
My view is very simple. I think jobs will disappear. The regular jobs where people just go and work and do their jobs is going to disappear. I think more or less the way, at least the culture I see in, let's say, in the US West Coast or in India, in Bangalore or in China or wherever, you will find that this is the norm. Most of the kids who come out of universities, graduates, they aspire to do
entrepreneurship.
And it's become the norm. And as I see it in the next 5 to 10 years, if you're not, you're like working in what we used to call a government organization. Previously, there were people who used to go into government and we used to say, oh man, that guy is meant for a government job, or he has to join the army, or he has to join something. So more or less, innovation is going to happen only with people who can do startups. And the ecosystems are all being built for people to be trained to do startups. My only thing is people need to have the right attitude. That's the very core thing. The right level of passion. And the problem that they are solving, most people want to be a me too kind of thing. There is an Uber, there is an Ola, there is no kind of me too. My view is if you take challenges which nobody else is touching, the road is easier. The path is laden with a lot of ups and downs. But if you stick to it, I think you will make it. So choosing the right challenge which you're going to address, doing it differently, and making sure that you're profitable. And these 3, if you do, it's an absolute no-brainer.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you so much, guys, for taking the time to watch this video, and thank you, Neetan, for slotting me in before or after one of these other ones that is hopefully being shown. I'm gonna assume remotely to this MBA class. So hello from quarantine Dubai. My name is Gary Shankman, and I have a list of questions that I'm supposed to answer. I think there's a longer version of the second half of this questionnaire in terms of advice for fundraising and some insights, that I typically share with entrepreneurs. And it's about an hour and a half long video. Hopefully Neetan can share that with the team. We recorded it for the AFCAR program in Tunisia, which is an incubator over there. Quickly about me, I run a early stage VC firm backed by a family office in the UAE. We're probably best known for bringing tech stars to the Middle East. We've done some 30 early stage investments over the past 3-ish years. No exits so far, but venture capital is about small checks and big dreams, and we're probably a few years away from our first liquidity event, which we're really excited about. I spent my career and how I got here, kind of in between corporate development, venture capital, agency world, and marketing and technology. I've started in many ways very similar to a lot of you guys. I went to Indiana University for undergrad, did not have an MBA, and I found a job online in the Middle East and kind of moved on sight unseen in 2008. And it was to work for a video technology company as a junior marketing person. And, at the time, the App Store was like this brand new thing that just came out. Twitter didn't have an app. It was still, on SMSs. And really the only way that people messaged each other was BlackBerry Messenger. And so that was kind of the universe of technology that I started out in, and kind of rode the progression of, especially from the video side of us, really consuming video with flash players. If you guys, learn about those in a history class, to obviously what we experience today with your Netflix, Amazons. The company that I work for, we ended up building BBC iPlayer, OSM Playout here in Dubai, AT&T Uverse in the US. And so it was a really cool opportunity as a younger person to see that. And it got me really passionate about technology coming out of school. And so seeing that technology and working on the buy side of our M&A team, I got to, really see the cool innovation that, people were creating with venture-backed companies. It got me super interested in that space, given that most of the companies that we were acquiring as a public entity were venture-backed, fast-growth startups. And, I knew right away that I wanted to be in that space, because you get to learn just an incredible amount very, very quickly, working on the deal side of these things. I think after that experience, moved to New York, spent a little bit of time in kind of agency land. I led the launch of the first video application for Vice Media, which was incredibly fun. And then moved back to the Middle East to do some government consulting work. Had a massive entrepreneurial failure trying to launch a phone in Nigeria, which was just a disaster. And licking my wounds, came back to Dubai and started working with government on acceleration programs. And from there was able to fundraise to bring Techstars to the region and to launch Neetan Ventures, which is the company that I run now. So that's been kind of the past decade and change of my life, condensed into a few quick minutes. I think I'm doing well on time. Cool. What are things that we look for when making a decision to invest? Three things. First of all, you are going to receive an incredible amount of super generic advice from most people who have to give advice without a lot of context. Even the best investors in the field, they're basing, most of their advice on aggregate data. So your journey might vary. If you have access to capital, if you have special access to being able to bring on an amazing team, if you have special access to a customer where you start, that you can start with, that changes that narrative. So, but without that, first thing, can the team do it? Both kind of technically, do they understand the problem that they're solving? But also broadly, can the CEO raise capital and hire? Is this a person who other people will continue funding? Is this a person that can look someone in the eye and convince them to take a lower salary and equity in something that is essentially worthless at the time, and go on this journey? Because that is what early stage technology companies are. You are creating value as you're going around. And in the beginning, there's not a whole lot of value there. Most early stage startups aren't funded with a equity priced round. They're funded with convertible debt. So basically, you're starting out with a bunch of debt on your books, and the idea is to go and build value much quicker than that debt converts. Do I believe that the team can do it? I think Fred Wilson probably said it best. The CEO only has 3 jobs, and it's to set the vision, keep cash in the bank, and to hire people smarter than themselves. And so if you can reasonably, if you're a B- on average across those 3 things, you'll be able to raise capital. 2, is this market, the market that your company is in, a market that I reasonably can understand or learn very quickly, to a degree that I'm comfortable making an assessment of whether the way that you're approaching the market makes sense? Can I be helpful to the company? Do I have contacts in that market? Can I step into an operational role if I'm really needed, and help with everything from copy to product management to whatever it is that you might need as an organization where you guys need support? I'm not a doctor. I've never worked in a hospital. I've never worked in healthcare. If you have an amazing next generation, medical device that needs specific certification from regulatory bodies around the world, I am not your guy. I've never done that. And so I would be hesitant to make an investment in a market that I don't feel that I'm an expert in. And I would definitely feel hesitant to make an investment if I feel that I cannot help the team in any operational capacity. And last but not least is is there financial opportunity for me to make money? At the end of the day, I'm not a high net worth individual making a relationship based investment. I'm a professional investor managing other people's money. So I need to have faith that over the investment period of my fund, I need to be able to create a liquidity event from the transaction that I'm going to be making into your company. And so, who's going to buy this thing? How long is it going to take? Does it need to go public, or will there be strategic interest from major companies out there today? What does that path look like? How much total capital will the company require? Am I capitalized as a fund enough, to even really be effective at providing financial support to this company? And so there is, you have to answer the financial question as well. Cool. What is advice that I can give on the art of fundraising? So I want everyone to open up their laptops, phones, whatever you have, and wiki survivorship bias. You should see, I think the first result is on Wikipedia, and it's with this World War II airplane. And the whole purpose of explaining survivorship bias is that basically all advice that you will hear about how to fundraise, and all the news that you will see on TechCrunch and TechMeme and all of these websites around the world is statistically irrelevant. By virtue of receiving professional venture capital worthy of praise in a high traffic publication, it already puts these companies in a very, very small percentage of probability. And so whatever they've done to get there, it's probably not exactly replicable, right? There are a million factors that result in kind of reality, and so following very specific advice and not really thinking deeply about your journey and about the market conditions will ultimately not be fruitful. So with that, take all advice with a grain of salt. But broadly speaking, fundraising. So it's sales. That's the easiest way of thinking about it. It's much like selling a very big, expensive thing to a company. Selling your stock to an investor is a process that takes months. It takes half a year. For a fund like myself, it can take 12 to 18 months to go and raise a vehicle from scratch. And so really thinking deeply about that sales process, more so than, it's different from sales, investors are somehow different from a typical customer, is, I think, wrong. Just like in a sales process, you have to build your target list. You have to really think deeply, much in a way that you would build a Facebook custom audience for your marketing campaign. You have to think who you're targeting, and you have to realize that only a small percentage of those investors will actually end up investing in your company. And so I think it would be really prudent to go through a sales process more so than anything else. And that means build a CRM, research the funds that you guys, are expecting to get an investments from. Make sure that they're active. Make sure that they're in the market for the kind of company that you guys are building. All of that is incredibly important. Second insight that I'm going to give you is that professional investors are employees. Unlike entrepreneurs who own all of their company and then they slowly dilute themselves to investors as they grow. So they get a much larger piece. They get a smaller piece of a much larger pie, and hopefully that's in absolute numbers a much better outcome for them. That's not the case for people like me. I manage other people's money, and that is governed by some very strict guardrails in terms of the size of the check that I can write, in terms of the region that I can invest in terms of the type of company that it is, in terms of how that company is structured, and any other number of agreements that I've made with my investors when I was pitching them the idea, the thesis for my fund. And even though you might have $1 billion idea, guaranteed 1,000x, everyone who invests is going to walk away with $1 billion in their pocket. If I'm not mandated by my investors to make that transaction happen, it's just not going to work. And so, you always have to be very careful of who you're targeting. And in some cases it's regional, in other cases it's sector based, and in some cases it's size based. If you're talking about sovereign wealth funds, these guys are writing 50, 100, $500 million checks, if they have $100 billion to manage. And so you can go and send 1 million emails to these organizations, but there's going to be no one there to even receive and have a conversation with around a transaction that small. So really being thoughtful about building out your investor list, and there's tons of resources available for this, is something that I really recommend. Cool. Any other general advice? As I think I'm already running way over my 10-minute allotment. Get to market. You guys are MBA students, so not all of you are technical. There are so many tools available today, not for developers. There's Glide, there's Bubble.io, there's Webflow, there's Airtable, there's Coda. You can build a prototype of most businesses that 10 years ago would have required an army of engineers over a weekend. It is incredible what no code can do. And you can take something to it's going to be held together with spaghetti and shoestring, but you can take something to a very functional prototype to a point where you can demonstrate to potential clients what is the benefit of this. If you're thinking of something remotely that has to do with physical logistics and it's not a purely software technology product, you can definitely run that thing without building complex software today. So get to market. There is zero excuse not to be extremely proficient with tool sets outside of typical business software. I would say that the minimum viable software stack for someone working in an early stage company these days includes all of the modern tool sets. And these include unstructured wikis. These include quick application builders and prototyping tools. All sorts of new ways to communicate with remote teams to really have that human connection so you guys can achieve more together. I would really recommend researching this stuff. And last but not least, very important, sales cures all. And I'm going to say it again, sales cures all. You can fundraise, great, make a sale, and then you don't have to because you would have made margin on your product. You have a competitor that you've seen in some other program or online that's developing something and you think it's better. If you outsell them, it doesn't matter if their product is better. Look around the world and think about every time you've seen a company whose product is not great. Clearly there was a competitor better. I mean, you have, probably again in your history books, you would have heard, we had, VHS and beta. We've had, CD-ROM technologies and optical storage technologies where basically better technology didn't mean it became a winning format. It was about better distribution. VHS and Blu-ray were about distribution. The reason that Blu-ray and not HD DVD is the optical format, the last optical format that everyone ended up using, is because Sony, who makes Blu-ray, also put a Blu-ray PlayStation also put a Blu-ray player in the PlayStation 4, meaning that at the time that the PlayStation launched, they've put more distribution for that optical media than the consortium of HD DVD producers out there, which were Panasonic and other companies at the time. So sales cures all. Cool. I'm way over my time. I hope that Neetan gives you the link to the longer version of this presentation. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and hopefully this was useful. All right, take care.
All right, everyone, this is Neetan back with you. So to summarize, in the three or four sections of this lecture, in the first section, you heard me set the context which characterizes the digital era. This was followed by one of the entrepreneurs who's in the platform
property related platform business, sharing his learnings with yourselves. Subsequently, we had another entrepreneur who has built a classical airline product and sharing his experiences with you. And finally, we had someone who's been a entrepreneur as well as over the last few years has been involved with the funding part of technopreneurship, right? So, this kind of summarizes and ends the guest lecture. What I would love for you to do now is two things. One is look through this lecture and summarize your top 10 learnings, right? So your top 10 learnings. And the second is take a topic or take an idea for which you are very passionate, and then build a business plan where you apply these 10 points of learning to this business plan. All right, thank you everyone. I hope you enjoyed the guest lecture and looking forward to further interactions with you. Thank you and bye-bye.